Hi everyone, my name is Angelica Hufstadt and I'm with One Young World. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce the next session. I want to welcome everybody here in this fantastic audience as well as everybody attending digitally back home. Behind me you'll find the Slido code, so please feel free to drop in any questions you may have during the session or reply to any live polls that we may have during the session as well. The session will be a panel discussion followed by a very special moment by Gray Cosby. So please, without further ado, on VO Life, why everyone hates vegans and what we can do to change that, welcome Lara Peppers, Anthony Mullally, Piran Harvey, Lauren O'Donnell, Stephanie Cabovianco.
Hello everyone, is it working? Yes. So wonderful to see you all here with such high numbers. It's a pleasure to be here and to moderate this session, why everyone hates vegans and what we can do to change that. My name is Lara and I work for a food awareness organization called Provision International. And our mission is to reduce the consumption of animal-based products with 50% in the year 2040. And there are many, many reasons to do that. And we're here at COP, a very, very important climate event. And one of the things that are not being discussed is the impact of animal agriculture on our planet. So before we hop to this, to the first questions, just some stats on why are we actually talking about vegans and why is that important. Just an example, in the UK, between 2014 and 2019, the amount of vegans quadrupled. And there's also a cash element to that. The plant-based meat industry, so plant-based meat alone, was projected to be worth $3.6 billion in 2020, and in 2021, $4.2 billion. It's huge. Well, why are people eating more plant-based products? It could be for animal welfare, it could be for taste, it could be for your health, but one of the main reasons is also for the environment. Just to give you some simple facts that I think no one is addressing at COP yet. 20% of the global emissions are caused by animal agriculture. And if you switch to a more plant-based diet, you can reduce your your food-related emissions with 50%. So, why are we then talking about vegans and what we can do to change that? Or why everyone hates vegans and what we can do to change that? I think these numbers show the importance of making being vegan more accessible or promoting a reduction diet in a way that people find it more accessible. And before I keep on blabbering on, we're going to go to the first question and everyone will introduce themselves. The first question is, what does activism actually mean to you? And we're going to start with Baron.
Cool. That was a bit louder than I expected. So I am from Upfield. We're the world's largest plant-based foods company with a lot of global brands, including Violife, who's sponsoring this event, and also brands like sort of Flora, Blue Band, Proactive, and Basel. So representing a corporate, activism is not necessarily the kind of thing that you would tie along with a corporate, but to me, what we can do as activists is use our connection with consumers to sort of encourage a plant-based diet and a plant-based shift. And to me, the metric of success for activism is whether we're successful in encouraging consumers to take on more sustainable dietary choices. So I think that's what we can do as a corporate.
And would you yourself describe yourself as an activist, as a plant-based activist?
I think there's a bit of there's a sort of divide between myself as a person and myself as a representative of my company. And I think that what we do can have success in turning people plant-based, and I think that is therefore activism. And then personally, I'm very committed to our products and the diets that we propose. I'm a vegan myself, so yes.
Thank you. And then we have Lauren. What does activism mean to you?
Hi everyone, so I'm Lauren, I'm the founder of Oatsu, and we help make mornings easier through our plant-based overnight oat breakfasts that we deliver across the UK. I left my corporate job about 1.5 years ago to start a breakfast business, and I've been making overnight oats for people over the last 1.5 years, and I'm going to be partnering with a manufacturer soon to enter supermarket retailers with my breakfast product over the next 6 months, excitingly. And I guess I represent the other side of the kind of scale. Rather than being a corporate, I'm more of a startup, and I think for me, activism is I guess the reason that I left my job and wanted to do this was because I was so passionate about plant-based food and helping to show people how delicious and accessible and exciting plant-based food can be, and that there are just as good options for your everyday breakfast product that are better for you and better for the planet. And aside from entrepreneurship, I've also aligned my personal investments in more kind of sustainable funds and shares. So I think that's another way that you can be an activist, is thinking also where your money is invested.
Thank you, Lauren. Very interesting. Anthony.
Hi guys, my name's Anthony Mullally. I am a professional rugby player and have been for the last 12 or so years. That's my job anyway, it's not necessarily who I am. But activism for me, it's kind of integrated into my career and into my lifestyle. I think you made a good point about, well, you said activism as long as it's kind of promoting veganism. It doesn't necessarily have to be, I think when we think of activism, we think of extremism a little bit. So for me, it can be any small thing. So activism for me is just performing on the field as a rugby player. 'Cause in that, I'm hopefully breaking down perceptions and stigmas in the process. And so I've played the game, say, I've scored the try, which doesn't happen a lot in my position. But if they're doing like some sort of physical feat, it doesn't go unnoticed, because I don't really talk a lot about being vegan. But then after some people realise, oh, you are vegan, and then you kind of correlate the physical performance with, have you been vegan? And they're like, oh, actually, I didn't think you could do that as a vegan. Then, so by me silently doing my job on the field and as an athlete, I think that is my form of activism, and promoting it in a positive way.
Thank you. Stephanie, do you want to introduce yourself, and what do you think about activism?
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm part of the Climate Say movement and the Plant-Based Treaty. I'm from Argentina, and activism means to me that a way to accelerate the changes we need, and also a way to empower people that might be maybe more shy to express themselves, to speak up.
Thank you. What do you guys think about, there are quite a lot of stereotypes involved around being vegetarian or being vegan. And the phrase of this session is, why do people hate vegans? Why do you think people hate vegans? Maybe let's start with that. Lauren, do you want to maybe shed your light on that?
I think sometimes like vegans can get a bad rap if they kind of take a bit more of an extreme approach. Sometimes people can misunderstand them, but also I think maybe people don't know, maybe they just dismiss veganism as a way of eating and as a way of life, and they might not actually know about it too much. So I just think it's important to, if you are speaking about what you're doing, is just to try and show people through your actions like how passionate you are, or if you're sharing some delicious food with people, just showing them how great it is, and kind of going about it that way, I think is the most positive approach.
And Baron, what are your thoughts on this?
So, as vegans, I think we're often, there's a point about moral superiority, which is, it's something that we're prone to fall into. You follow this diet because you think it's, or you know it's better for the environment, or better for animals, or whatever your reasons, you think it's a better diet, and therefore that often gives you license to feel like you're better than other people. And unfortunately that's really not a very good way of convincing people to follow a more sustainable diet, or making people not hate you. So I think it's moral superiority, and some kind of, the reputation of vegans is that we're sanctimonious often, and we don't have to be. we can find ways of convincing people positively.
Yes, thank you. And Stephanie, do you have thoughts on this? And maybe you have an example of personal experience that you have where you thought someone is being not so friendly towards me because I identify with being vegan.
Well, I don't think people hate us. Do you hate us? No. Yeah? Okay. No, maybe I think people feel more uncomfortable when we are challenging their belief systems. And yeah, like our brains are, according to neuroscience, our brains are wired to, you know, to do the same thing because it feels good, and when we want to change something, we feel this, like we are taking them out of their comfort zones, and I think that's maybe they feel guilty, and that's why they don't like. But I don't think, at least I haven't received any hate, but yes, discomfort. Yeah, thank you.
And Anthony, do you have any experience with maybe someone disliking you or being not so nice towards you when they figured out you were following a plant-based diet?
I don't think of experiencing like actual hate or dislike, but obviously being in a rugby team and being around a lot of like macho alpha males, always trying to like compete and try. Like we were speaking to earlier about hierarchies, and then you come in like a sports team, and everyone outside of the sports team, they're deemed as like this epitome of what it looks to be like to be masculine, and then but you bring them all together, and then they're trying to like topple for this throne as like the ultimate macho man. And so obviously I'm in that environment, unfortunately, and I've definitely, so like for example, we're out for dinner as a team, so we eat a lot as a team, and then there's like a plant on the table. They like push the plant towards me and be like, "That's your dinner," or "Go eat the grass outside" and stuff. But I don't generally think it's. Well, I know it's a joke. I don't think it's malicious. But I think there's a good point when you said, "Well, I think we do." I mean, so when you say it to people, I think they feel like you're challenging their moral compass. So I think, and then because I think innately we're all like compassion is fundamental. So. So when we feel like if someone says something and it makes us question our moral compass, like, oh, I don't like that, so we're going to like push that away. And sometimes I feel that can be like backfired. And we definitely go about it the wrong way as vegans. Sometimes I know I did at the start of my journey. So to answer your question, more banter than actual hate, but there's definitely a lot of like stuff going on.
That actually, is a good bridge towards the next question, because when you advocate towards a more plant-based diet, there's a couple of things that probably work better when you say them, and a couple of things that when you mention them are probably not the most effective thing to say. Do you have an example of something you've once said that, looking back, you thought that was actually not a good idea to do it in that way? I should have said that in a different way, or maybe I shouldn't have said anything at all. Lauren, do you maybe have an example of that, or something comes to mind?
I tend not to try and like impose my views too much kind of on people. And yeah, a lot of my friends like aren't plant-based, aren't vegan, and similarly we do go out for dinner. And yeah, sometimes there's jokes and stuff, but I have actually noticed that a lot of friends have started eating more plants. They might not be doing it like every day, but it's kind of getting more and more common. And yeah, so I'd say, in answer to your question, there haven't been any examples where I've kind of thought that, but as I mentioned, I just try and show people. I like to cook, and like if I have pre-COVID like birthday parties or whatever, I just like make a bunch of plant-based food that tasted really great, and introduced some people who might have been naysayers before that.
I see Anthony looking like he has an example, or is that maybe? Oh, you're struggling
No.
thinking.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know how many people are plant-based in the room or vegan, and at the start you have this like crushing desire to like spread the word. You're like, right, this is happening, this animal feed is taking this much from the rainforest, etc. We know what we're reading all these facts, like someone you mentioned at the start. And like you want to just go out and tell the world, and like again that kind of way you come at people, it pushes them away. So like my rugby player mates would say, it makes them want to eat more meat. By me coming to that, so they like want to spite me and go eat more meat. So it's counterproductive. So I found out, eventually teammates would come to me one by one and ask me questions here or there, and I found it's a much better way to meeting with compassion and. Let them come to you, and then you just, well, if you just read this article, this will show you that, and you can do it quite gently, and it's the best way to do it instead of like forcing your opinion onto someone else, because it seems to never work.
Does someone hold a different view on that?
I think there are often ways where we don't have to force our view, but there's a way in which we should be saying our view. So at Upfield, we definitely find that data works. We do a lot of sort of very comprehensive life cycle assessment studies on the full environmental impact of our products. So we know that sort of telling people about the lower environmental impacts with actual numbers versus the dairy counterparts to our products does work. And that's not at all the same as shoving things down people's faces, but there's saying, you know, here's the impact of your diet now, here's what it could be. So I think you can use those figures productively, yeah.
And Stephanie, for how long have you been following a plant-based diet?
Since 2010, I was vegetarian because I've been living in Brazil for a while, and all of my friends were vegans and vegetarians as well. And when I came back to Argentina, that was very hard. At those times, we didn't have like many options as we have right now, as many options as we have. So then I became vegan in 2019, and it was great, and I became an activist. I'm coming more from an environmental field and mixing these two things, you know, the environmental activist with the animal rights activist feels like part of the same, because it is. And yeah, I'm trying to raise awareness about that with all of my colleagues.
Yeah, that's quite a journey. Is there anything, if you look back on your journey, that you think, you know, you should have done differently, or you could share with people that they could learn from you, like something you wouldn't say or something you would recommend?
Yes, do not fight with your family members. It's not, doesn't work. Probably, like, my brother is turning to a plant-based diet because of his girlfriend, not because of me. So, yeah, do not fight with your families. Make a different person do that for you instead. Yeah.
Do you share this view, the view on the family? How important is family or your environment in supporting you and following a more plant-based diet?
For me, I've found that with my family, we've now pretty much all turned vegan or nearly vegan as a family, and what's really helped has been cooking together and people having various different intolerances that has made, made cooking sort of more plant-based in general. And certainly what hasn't worked has been attacking them, which I have done. It's been cooking together and sort of looking at food together and what we eat together has sort of caused a dietary change in my family.
Yeah, and has then the environmental angle been the strongest in convincing your family to eat more sustainable, or was it the animal welfare one, for example?
It's the environmental angle for my family, because that's the kind of, as I said before, that's the kind of the data that I have to my fingertips that I can share with them and sort of and use that as a tool. The environmental angle.
Yeah, and Anthony, I'm actually really interested in, you already mentioned your team players and the link to masculinity, and maybe even, I'm interpreting this now, but being masculine means to eat a lot of meat. That's what it means to be a man. How did you bridge that gap, or how did you create that understanding in your team for your diet?
Slowly. So when I obviously diet correlates heavily with performance. So, and performance being my source of income, I had to take course, and it took me 2 years to go from cutting out red meat to vegan. And so I stopped eating red meat, then chicken, fish, vegetarian. Pescatarian, vegetarian, then vegan. But when I was just eating chicken, I was at a team lunch and I hadn't told anyone I didn't eat meat. So because I was kind of worried about people's opinions at the time. This was, it's about 5 years ago. So obviously I've learned a lot since then. And I took the chicken off the plate and I hid it in napkins, and because I wasn't bothered what people thought. I just couldn't be bothered with the 20 guys giving me crap. Do you know what I mean? So I was just trying to be clandestine with it, and I was hiding the chicken, and then eventually the guys found out and told the team managers, and he just come up to me, he was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "You should have told us, we got you a veggie dish." I was like, "All right, well, that would have been a lot easier." Yeah, so, yeah, it was me just trying to, like, sneak under the carpet, and then, like, I realized, like what you said, if you just kind of, like, be open and be honest about your views, people are a lot more understanding than you think, but you will get some abuse at the same time. Friendly banter, as they call it. But yeah, they're about meat is manly. There's these misconceptions and stigmas, and so for me, I had to try to break that down by still doing what they could do while they're eating meat, and by eating like black beans. So, and then hopefully try shift that a little bit. And around my team anyway, I'll like to think change their perspective a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Something else, we're here at COP in Glasgow, or COP is around the corner, and world leaders are gathering to talk about systematic changes that are needed. And we know that food isn't really part of the agenda, or animal agriculture and plant-based diets. What do you think is a very important thing world leaders should address when it comes to plant-based diets or reduction? Is there something specific that you hope they will take on board? Baron, do you have an idea?
I do.
Yes.
Methane. I've been really impressed this week seeing a lot of things like the global methane targets, which I'm sure you all saw, and then other announcements like the agricultural innovation mission, and various other sort of announcements into innovation in agriculture. And we very much need innovation in agriculture to reduce our emissions. But it seems that there's sort of one glaring omission in that, which is that we also need a shift towards sustainable consumption. We can't just look at livestock and try to sort of slightly reduce the emissions of livestock. We need to look at our own consumption and how we can reduce our consumption of livestock in order to reduce our emissions. I'm sure you mentioned some of these stats before, but things like, the food system is over a third of our global emissions. Livestock and animal farming accounts for between 14.5 and 20% of our global emissions. Yeah. And we're just sort of not viewing that one large part of our global emissions. And I think it's something that we really need, policymakers to start looking at.
Mm. And Stephanie, you are active on the Plant-Based Treaty, which is a great initiative. What is one of the key things that you hope the world leaders will take on board from the Plant-Based Treaty?
Well, the Plant-Based Treaty is a campaign that we launched a few months ago to raise awareness about the land degradation and the animal agriculture degradation in general, and to move towards a plant-based food system, not only from a consumption point of view, but also from a production point of view. And policymakers are playing a huge role on that. So we hope that all the cities endorse the Plant-Based Treaty, and also that they make a strong public policies to, for instance, reduce the amount of meat production, always taking into account that we need a fair transition because we need to take care about the workers and the farmers. Of course, that we are addressing the big industries, not the small ones yet. And I think that change is possible. There are lots of examples and a lot of good examples coming from the Netherlands, for example. So I really encourage everyone to follow what they are saying, because it's very radical comparing to other political views. I had a meeting with the national delegation today, and we had kind of a strong debate with the agriculture sector. Because they were saying things like, we need to reduce the methane, but only from the energy sector. The main methane, the main amount of methane is coming from the agriculture sector. So we need to seriously address that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And Lauren, maybe when you hear these suggestions, you maybe stand in it differently because you're an entrepreneur. You look at it from a business perspective. Do you think governments could play a role in stimulating or helping businesses thrive?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've had to do a lot of my own research as a business owner about what I can do. So lots of research into packaging and labels and yeah, just basically sourcing the most sustainable option. And then as well, ingredients. There isn't that much help out there, I found. I do think there could be more in the way of like incentives for businesses who are thinking about the environment in the decisions that they make, whether that's through perhaps corporate tax breaks or innovation funds, or there's lots of things that can be done. I think something that a lot of businesses in the plant-based space are trying to do now, and something that people are getting a bit more aware of, are B corporations. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's companies that are balancing people, profit, and planet together. And it's quite a rigorous certification that businesses have to go through, and it shows that you're thinking about, you've got procedures and policies in place. That means you're thinking about all of these things holistically. And it's something that I'm striving towards, but perhaps the government could help raise awareness about this so that consumers know to look out for that stamp of approval.
Yes, great, thank you. Back to the personal questions. What do you think, I'm going to raise one of the arguments I think when you eat a more plant-based diet, you're going to hear people say. One of them is, what you addressed already in a way, is your moral authority over other people. So vegans or following a more plant-based diet, when you do that, you probably are going to tell everyone, how to live their life, and you need to be perfect all the time. And I think probably you're all not perfect. I'm not perfect. So is there anything you think you could do better in regards to sustainability besides following a plant-based diet? You want to go ahead? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's more of a, it's just a, we'll go back to what you said first regarding the moral superiority. I feel it's really hard. I think when we looked at the questions originally, it said, can you have an extreme approach if you're not like living like a perfect life, like you just said, being perfect in. And for me, every decision, majority of consumer decisions in dietary anyway have a cost, have some sort of there'll be some sort of suffering attached if it's insects, etc. So when everything has a cost again. So for me, we've got a circle of control and a sphere of choice, and in that choice, like, what are you going to choose? Are you going to choose something that's dramatically costing the planet, or the least amount of harm you can cause? So for me, it's just an integrated lifestyle. Like where's your toothpaste? Like, where's your toothbrush? Like, are you eating meat? It's just like, for me, it's a. I mean, we're in the Revos that have been recycled plastic. It's just the whole. Just got a free pair of them, by the way. Not sponsored, but yeah. And for me, it comes from. I don't mean to go a bit out there, but it was amazing that Ron's talk before. Obviously, I don't have an orbital perspective, but. Yeah. I feel like our role as sapiens used to be like stewards or custodians for the planet, where now we're more like consumers, more dictators. So I feel the more we can reintegrate our relationship, if we look at different indigenous cultures and the really symbiotic relationship with the land, I feel if we can move back towards that kind of relationship, we'll have less of a desire to want to take more than we need from the planet. So never mind, like, again, these little choices about, like, can we reconnect with and realize what we're a part of, then yeah, like calling people out and creating more separation. So that's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And is there anything, Perrin, that you are currently doing that you would like to improve in regards to sustainability?
Well, I think in general we can't just trade off being vegans as implying that we're therefore incredibly sustainable people. Yeah. We all need to massively cut down on air travel, and we need to take fewer taxis and reduce the amount of sort of car travel we use, change the energy in our homes. There's so much that we all need to be doing, and then answering it on. As a company as well, we can't just trade off ourselves being a plant-based company to imply that we're sustainable at all. It's very possible that we could be a plant-based company and be evil. So we do things like we have a net zero target by 2050 and an interim 2030 target to reduce scope 1 and 2 emissions to net zero. We've already introduced carbon labelling onto millions of our packs, and we're rolling that out to 500 million by 2025. And we're reducing our plastic use by 95% by 2030. So there are so many ways in which you have to look at, as a company and as a person, you have to look at everything you're doing and how you can reduce the impact of everything that your operations or your personal choices are related to.
Yes, thank you for sharing. So there might be people listening who are new to following a more plant-based diet, and maybe new also to the word activism, because I think a lot of people respond in a certain way to the word activism. Is there one thing you could share with the audience that, you know, when you think back about your own journey at the beginning, what would be the first thing if they, after this talk, when they listen to this talk, they go home, what is the first thing they could do? What would be the easiest thing to do or to change? Lauren, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, it reminds me of when I first switched to a plant-based diet. So, I was doing a graduate scheme and I had a secondment in Hong Kong. And I met a yoga teacher there who did a screening of What the Health documentary and learned a lot about the impacts on the body of consuming meat and dairy, and kind of opened my eyes to it. And she actually organised a bunch of like meals and like meetups and dinners in various vegan restaurants around Hong Kong, all different types of cuisine. I got to meet some amazing people who followed a plant-based diet, and it really inspired me to adopt it. And I followed a vegan diet for the first time then for a month, and I felt amazing. So I think the takeaway from that could be, if you aren't already, just going out and exploring all the vegan options in your town or city, and just discovering new products, maybe on the supermarket, picking up something different. There are some amazing meat alternatives now. I'm a big fan of tempeh, which originally is traditionally eaten in Indonesia, which is made of soybeans, which is a great alternative to tofu. So I'd probably say just trying new things. And then separate to that, on the investment side, I didn't know this, but everyone here who's got a pension, so whether that's a workplace pension, or you might have a personal pension, or you might have a stocks and shares ISA, potentially, you can actually choose what funds you're invested in, and you can have a look at what companies are in those funds. You can do your research and look at the websites of those companies and see if your values align with theirs. So I wouldn't necessarily leave your your pension investments in the set fund choices that your company might choose on your behalf. I'd suggest people to do a little bit more research into that and see what options there are, because there are sustainability-focused funds that you can choose.
Thank you. That's very, very practical advice. Great. And Stephanie, what would be your suggestion?
I would suggest that we all endorse the Plant-Based Treaty. It's plantbasedtreaty.org. We are from all over the world, so we are looking for campaigners, people, organizations. More than 500 organizations already endorsed, so we hope you can also join. Thank you.
And Anthony, would you have a suggestion?
Do you mean strictly on the activism part, or just integrate it in a plant-based diet?
Yeah, not necessarily activism.
Okay.
If you wanna explore the plant-based diet.
Yeah, so like you said, mate, you can be a plant-based company and be evil. You can also be a vegan and be unhealthy. So you could just eat white bread and Oreos all day. It's not healthy. There's no nutritional value. So for me, I always say the big two things is research and preparation. So researching what you need to eat, what you need to replace. So obviously you're not eating meat, so we need to replace B12. You're not having fish, so we need to have omega-3s, DPA, DHA, and BPA. We need to get that in. So that kind of research is really important. And then preparation. So your food, I am the worst cook. I just put black beans and rice and mushrooms in a wok and just cook it up. I am not very creative, but I get what I need. You know what I mean? So I get exactly what I need, and it might be creative, but it helps me perform. So research and preparation are my two big tips. And
did you go vegan or plant-based overnight, or did you take it in steps?
I definitely take it in steps. I think even that some things I've listened to regarding your gut microbiome, obviously I'm not a scientist, but I've heard is that it's best for us to transition slowly. So as much as, obviously we don't have a lot of time, as much as ideally we'd go vegan overnight, I think for our bodies we need to set ourselves achievable goals. I'm right, I'm going to cut out this much this week and then go like that. I think it's more attainable for people, because if they see I'm going to go vegan now, it's like climbing a mountain. But then if they can see these small steps, I think it's a lot more encourageable for them.
Thank you. And Perrin, what will be your suggestion?
I think if you haven't sort of tried a vegan diet or vegan foods, the most impactful thing is the first step. Because after the first step, then you can, assess more the sustainability of your diet. You can look into the various environmental impacts of the things that you're eating. But that first step, so trying a plant-based meal, if it's not something you normally do, can just be so eye-opening, and it can make you see, hopefully you would see that it's something that you would really like to do, and that you're therefore able to maybe look further into it and take more steps to increase the sustainability of your diet. And the health credentials.
What was your first step?
My first step, I was 6, and I had very uncomplex childlike thoughts about thinking it was mean for animals. So I one day came home and told my mum I was a vegetarian, and she didn't believe me, but I was. And then after that, I went vegan when I was 18, and I found that very tough. But I think I lapsed a few times in the first few months, and then eventually I learned about fortification, and that was good. Yeah.
And Lauren, do you remember your first step that you took towards a plant-based diet? Was that replacing dairy, or was it meat or fish?
Yeah, so I mentioned it was when I moved out to Hong Kong that I kind of went quite hard and fast on the whole month, just enjoying a vegan diet completely. And that was the first time I kind of taken it really seriously. And I felt like I had a lot more energy and like genuinely just felt way better after that. But I think before that, a few years before that, I just got a bit more into cooking and eating healthily and after university. So uni was just like 3 years of, too much drinking, definitely, and not eating so great. But it was after that when I moved back home, started working, kind of got a bit more serious. That I started experimenting a bit more in the kitchen and incorporating more plants into my diet.
And do you have a similar experience, Tiffany?
I left, I think, milk first because, for me, like it was kind of disgusting when I found out like about the process, and then I made like step-by-step replacements, and that's how it worked.
And I assume, Anthony, you had to follow, because you are very active in sports, you really have to check what you're eating, right? You need to get in the right intakes. Everyone has, but when you're on a sport diet, usually you would do this on a daily basis. Was that a difficulty when you switched towards more plant-based eating to figure that out?
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier, the process, it was from red meat, chicken, it was like literally one thing at a time over 2 years. And so the first thing is like, so I was like typical chicken, broccoli and rice. So I was like, take chicken out, then what goes there? So I get asked in the research, and because I'm not very creative, I couldn't just like chop some tempeh up and like put a nice like rub on it and like cook it, because I wasn't that creative. So I was just putting like lentils there, like it was quite unpleasant at the start. So it took me it took me a while, and I make mistakes. Like, I'm going to confession now, but hopefully I don't lose me vegan endorsements. But about 2 years in, I was at McDonald's and I was drunk, and I ate some chicken nuggets. I was drunk. I was with the boys, and there was these chicken nuggets behind me. I was just like, I grabbed one, but I had one, and I was just like throwing them in. This is about 5 years ago, and the next day I was with him. I had my head in my hands. I was like, I've got to tell you, lads, I can't do it. I had some chicken nuggets yesterday, and they all just burst out laughing and getting me. But like, that's it. We make mistakes. Like, obviously, I was drunk. I was new in my journey. So it's like, it's not like condemning yourself for making those mistakes, and just knowing like you're gonna have setbacks along the way. But as long as you get back on, and like your morals are your driver, you stay there. And like, we're only human, like you say. We're not perfect.
Nice. Thanks for sharing. We have some time for questions. Maybe there's someone in the audience who would like to ask one of the panelists a question. Yes, in the back.
Do you find that using the term plant-based gets a better response than using the term vegan?
And you address the question to a specific person? Everyone. Perrin, go ahead.
Yes, is the short answer. Yes, I think there's a lot of consumer research on this as well, that it's more palatable to use the word plant-based. There are important distinctions though, and as a company we use both. If you're following a vegan diet, you need to know that the foods that you're buying are vegan, so things like vegan labels on pack are really useful. But if you're looking at maybe an audience who doesn't tend to follow a vegan diet, then the word plant-based is a really good way of sort of signposting that something is, has that portfolio but makes it less exclusive and less sort of, unobtainable. Yeah.
And Lauren, what is your experience?
Yes, very similar. So we do have to state like suitable for vegans on the back of pack, but on the front, I decided to use plant-based just because it is more inclusive. And I think if people do see the word vegan, they might think, oh, maybe I have to be vegan to enjoy this, rather than it being like suitable for everyone. So I think plant-based is definitely less divisive, more inclusive.
Yeah, I agree. I believe it's definitely more inclusive. But it's, for me, I find myself wanting to say it in social situations to like avoid certain backlash. But this is something I need to work on. Like, right, you're not gonna cop out and say it just to avoid confrontation. But again, you don't want to throw in people's face. But yeah, it's definitely easier to say plant-based because the conversation can move on. But if you're vegan, it's like, oh wait, like a little things. But for me, it comes back to just your ethics, like. Plant-based doesn't. I'm not really sure the distinction, but for me, I don't consume animal products and anything that come from it that belongs to an animal. But I still identify as plant-based sometimes. I mean, it depends on the day. So, yeah.
Yes, and for me, it's also a yes, because food is in our everyday life, and I think it's the first step to start being vegan through the food, and then we can start thinking of the other ways of animal exploitation. So yeah, I think it's a very good way, even more when you're with environmentalists that are not considering yet animal rights.
Thank you. I see a question there.
Okay, so I'm not vegan or vegetarian, sorry.
That's okay.
But I do eat vegan and vegetarian food. And I don't hate vegan people, so about the topic. So regarding my concept, I think what really I don't like is just when we go to an event like the One Young World, for example, the summit in 2019, when we have 2,000 people coming from over 193 countries and convincing them to eat just vegetarian food, I think that is not the right approach to convince people. I think even for data, because I have done a research when I was doing my master's at Strathclyde University, and also another research with Stanford, collaboration with Stanford University. So regarding smart farms, so I think I've seen also some of the arguments that has been mentioned early on was like it takes more than 2,400 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of meat, and also only 25 gallons of water that's required to grow 1 pound of wheat, for example. But for me, but also for vegan or vegetarian food, for example, in China, who rely like 80% of their diet's on rice, and rice is consuming, I think, gazillion amount of water, and this is so changing diet of nation like Chinese could be ridiculously hard. So I'm just wondering how we could get approach to make a balance, because still we need these species to exist, and as long as they're existing, so how we could make that balance in a planet here.
So thank you. That's a great statement. Is your question addressed? If I translate it to, should everyone eat vegan? Should everyone be vegan? Can I summarize it like that? Is that the criticism?
No, just how could make the balance, because still these species will be existing. Like those animals should be there because they have been there for gazillion years. So they should be there. So how we could just keep those animals there and still balancing the diets of saving the planet at the same time. So how could make that balance existing while using your approach of like convincing people to become vegan?
Stephanie, do you maybe want to respond to that?
Yeah, so now I'm part of COP26, and we are trying to make 100% plant-based menus for the next COPs. And I think it's not a big effort, like for 2 weeks, to eat vegan food or plant-based food, because everyone actually is like the most inclusive way to, make it happen and for everyone. And also, if we have, let's say we have a plant-based world, so to feed the animals, we need to plant more plants and use more agrochemicals and use more water and more land, which means more deforestation and more biodiversity loss than if we only plant food to feed people. So I guess our current food system is very inefficient. And plant-based food systems, of course, we need to take care of like how we produce food, even if we follow a plant-based production. But it's possible, and it's way more efficient according to the most updated data, environmental data, and from a nutritional perspective as well. And yeah, so I guess science is in the plant-based side now. So thank you.
Someone else wants to add something to that?
Yes. So I think there are two parts to that question. I think the first is about, we can't just follow a vegan diet and assume that's a sustainable diet. You brought up rice and water usage, and I think the answer to that is comprehensive on-pack environmental labelling. If we know the environmental impacts, things like land use, fresh water use, carbon emissions of the foods that we're buying, then that's easier to overcome those sort of mistakes of assuming that if it's vegan, it's sustainable, if it's not, it's not. And then the other part was about whether we need to reduce all animal agriculture to zero. And with that, so we would argue for a predominantly plant-based food system, but it doesn't have to be a completely plant-based food system. There's a lot of merit in the idea that a sort of regenerative agriculture system whereby you have grazing animals, improving soil health is useful. However, my problem with that debate is that it so often gets used to prop up a view that we therefore need to continue consuming a load of meat and dairy. A proper regenerative agriculture system would be a far reduced amount of animals grazing the land, and so we can still support those views while having a massive reduction in meat and dairy intake.
I think, Anthony, you wanted to say something too, or was it in line with what Baron was saying?
I'm not sure how relevant it'll be, but that was a great example regarding the rice and the labels. But so people will always give meat's doing that, but then this does this. So it's you don't have to do both. You know what I mean? So they'll try to give you a counter argument for something that's detrimental in the plant-based diet, whilst doing all of it. So like I said before, we're just trying to choose our path of least harm. Like I said, there's always a cost, mate. Exactly, and I agree with the regenerative farming. I feel if it is going to happen, people say to me, I only eat grass-fed beef, and I ask them where, and they say, it might have said it in Sainsbury's. I'm like, well, it's not, is it? Unless you're going to the farm and seeing it yourself, it's not happening. There's that cost between buying it in the store and what happened. There's that massive gap in between, and that's because we're so disconnected from that's part of the issue. So I think it's more the information side.
Thanks for sharing. Are there any other questions? I think there was, yes, on the right.
We're sort of getting onto this point, but I'm curious what you would say to a family whose livelihood is dependent on, say, dairy farming, or I'm just curious from, I agree there's a transition and there's a, cost to the transition, but I'd be curious to know what you would personally say to them about their livelihood and how it should change.
Thank you. Good question. Who would like to respond to that? Yeah, go ahead.
So we have lots of small farmers in not only in Argentina but in many parts of the world. But I talk with many of them, and I think they support the idea of the transition, but they would like to get help in doing that. And there were many proposals that I've heard in COP from different organizations, like putting a tax to the meat, accounting the pollution and all the resources the meat industry is taking could help the small farmers to make the transition. So I think that solutions like that could help, but again, it's not about the small farmers right now. It's about the big industries first that should set an example and start this transition.
And Baron, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tough situation in not just the agriculture sector, but in in the energy sector and lots of sectors where we need a just transition to help individual people and sort of move livelihoods onto sustainable jobs. I think it's really it's on the shoulders of policymakers to fund and help implement a just rural transition, and that will involve things like helping farmers to make best use of their land and to make sure their land is appropriate for transitioning toward a lower carbon production. I think it's the sort of it's a really difficult one when you look at personal cases where people might be affected, and I just really hope that we can get a just transition whereby everyone is taken along with us in the in the transition to a hopefully more plant-based food system.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Oh, there, yes. Hello.
Yeah, we've got a question for Anthony. Did you notice any shift or change in your capacity to heal after training? Obviously, we're in extreme sports, so for anyone that's an extreme sports person, that capacity to heal and recover from training, was there a transition period where you noticed that you ached a bit more, and after the body sort of acclimatized, that you sort of actually could heal quicker, perhaps?
Yeah, there's two. Someone asked me. So I'm staying in Edinburgh. And my friend plays for Edinburgh, and he was asking me about it. He was asking me some questions. And there's two things. There's mental clarity. For some reason, cutting out red meat enabled me to access somewhere that I couldn't normally go. I'm not sure why, and that led me into like a different path. But then the healing part. Look, everyone's seeing game changers. I'm a fan of it, but I don't think we should champion veganism as this like superior thing. I think we should be saying vegans can compete just as well as meat eaters. I don't think we should be saying we can compete better, because I think that's what it's trying to get across. But that doesn't make a good documentary, does it? So I appreciate that. It's got to be a bit controversial. But I did feel better in my recovery. Obviously, I took it very slow. I had nutritionists working with me regularly, and we tracked a lot of stuff. And so in a rugby game, like extreme sports as well, it's chaos. Like the body isn't made to play rugby. We're getting tackled from all different angles, like men like the size, like set my size, 2-3 people at a time, and I can't. After a game, I'm gonna be wrecked. But in resistance training, like aerobic, like weights, that's where I saw the recovery. I wasn't getting as we say DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. I wasn't getting as bad as that, and I still don't. It still happens, but it enables you to increase your intensity of training because I was recovering a bit quicker. So, and I say that I've been quite open tonight. I'm not. Well, I'm a little bit biased, but I try not to be. So that is legit. The recovery was a big factor in the change. So yeah, that would help. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Are there more questions here in the front?
Hi, thank you. I have a question for Anthony. A lot of us here know why we're here and we've come to COP and we're talking and sharing stories. I'm curious about your teammates, what they make of you coming to here, and do they know about COP? Do you talk to them about COP? And what do they think of you being here at this event?
They used to it. Like they used to like me. I've always been seen as like an alternative rugby player for the last like 5 years, because when I first went plant-based vegan, I was going to different the veg festivals and doing talks like about veganism in professional sport. So they were used to it. So like obviously I'm into meditation, etc. So I've always been like an esoteric rugby player. So now they just don't bat an eyelid. They're just like, but at the start it's like they can't quite comprehend it, and so it comes with resistance, and I get a lot of stick. Like I mentioned, eat that grass. Like I'm a hippie, I just get called a hippie all the time. So yeah, that's the kind of just like Mo's doing some hippie stuff again, talking about the planet, hugging trees. So yeah, that answers your question. That's the kind of backlash I get.
Thank you. I think there was one more question here. Yes.
I've got some questions here from the digital audience that's tuning in to the session. And one of the questions we've got is how expensive it is to go fully vegan, whether you found your expenses increased as you went vegan, and how can we compete against cheap meat and processed food?
It wasn't addressed to specific panelists, right? Who wants to, you maybe want to?
I think like if you're predominantly eating like whole foods, I think it really can be cheap and really affordable. It might take a little bit more time to prepare them, but if you're just like chopping up a bunch of vegetables, I similarly eat a lot of lentils. I try not to eat a bunch of like processed meat alternatives that have come out. I don't know how you guys feel about them, but there tends to be a lot of ingredients in them, and they aren't actually as whole food and as natural as the real vegetables that we're blessed to have and that are so delicious. So I think there are definitely very affordable, like canned pulses, beans, chickpeas and vegetables. So yeah, definitely doesn't have to be expensive if you steer away from some of those more premium, specifically made products.
You want to respond?
Yeah, I'll jump in too. So with our products themselves, we make plant-based alternatives to dairy that tend to be on an equal or better price basis than the dairy counterparts, and that just comes with time, basically. So a lot of the newer plant-based products are still priced higher because it's it takes a while to scale and reduce costs and get cost savings. But then on a broader level, the other issue is that in many markets, agricultural subsidies prop up the least sustainable industries instead of using agricultural subsidies to make more sustainable products and more sustainable diets more easier to consume, and also to incentivize farmers to produce those kinds of things. So that's the issue that we need to tackle, that will further down the road make the price point, it will solve that. Yeah.
Yeah, I see Stephanie nodding. Do you want to add something to that, maybe?
I completely agree. Like, if you eat healthy, it's going to be cheaper, as in any type of nutrition. And if you go for the more processed food, the price is going to increase. So yeah, but eat like lentils, legumes, cereals, vegetables, and fruits are way more cheaper than meat. So yeah.
Yes, thank you. And of course, divesting away from animal agriculture would be a way to create price parity, but that's a whole another debate, I think. Is there another question?
There are a few more from the online audience.
Yes, go ahead. We have a couple of minutes.
Yeah, we can maybe take one more. We've got one here which asks if there are any new vegan products that are less known but will likely grow fast, / what's next for the vegan market?
What's next for the vegan market? Maybe Baron, you want to shed your light on that?
I would say go to your local supermarket and look at the vegan cheese aisle and search out the Violife ones. Yes, I am doing an advert here. There are loads and loads of different Violife sort of options. There are options to various different types of cheese, and they're coming out all the time, and they're brilliant. So yes, I'm sorry I used that as an advert.
Do you want to comment on that, Lauren?
Yeah, sure. So I recently went to the Plantbased Expo, which is like a food show, trade show, and it's such an exciting place. There are so many new and upcoming brands showcasing their latest products, and there were predominantly actually, there was a lot of meat alternatives, companies like this. There were lots of like bacon alternatives, kind of burgers made in various ways, a lot of which you can already buy in the supermarket. So I think a lot of those new products are coming. I've mentioned tempeh as well, which is made from soya beans, which is great. But yeah, I think meat alternatives. There was also some like seafood alternatives, like tuna made kind of through chickpeas, I think. And then I see like a big rise in plant-based milks as well. As you can see, like there's now such big sections dedicated to that in the supermarkets. And I tried a potato milk at the expo, which was actually better than I thought. Like pretty good, pretty creamy. So yeah, kind of watch out.
Thank you. We have time for one more question.
Up here.
Up there, yes.
I want to ask you a question. If you had a chance to move to the countryside, grow your own food, and live in a different kind of lifestyle and mindset, to really be an example, would you do that? I mean, there's a lot of movement of young people in the US moving from the rat race in major cities and buying land inside. And since COVID, a lot of young people have moved to the country to do that, to live in a self-contained way. Would you?
So who from this panel would like to move to the countryside? Yes.
Grow your own food, generate your own power, recycle everything.
Well, I've moved to the coast in Cornwall, so I can surf every day. Well, swell depending. So yeah, definitely. I don't feel like you see it now. It's a bit of not a craze, but it's a good craze. A lot of urban farmers, you really using the space really well, and they really champion how you can create a lot of produce in not a lot of space. So yeah, that's the dream, isn't it? Obviously, land's expensive, but I'd absolutely love to do that. And like you say, hydroponics, etc., just completely self-sustainable. I feel that's a common. I know a lot of people who want to move into everyone wants to move into a commune at the minute, like a Wild Country vibe from Netflix, but maybe not quite like that. But yeah, it's definitely something I'd like to do for sure.
A parent doesn't want to move to the countryside.
Was it that obvious?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of value in promoting urban sustainability as well. I think it's really great that there's a move for people to move to the countryside and become self-sufficient, but we can also live in cities and support sustainable supply chains. So no, I don't.
Thank you. That's a nice note to end on, I think. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to our panelists. Yes.
Oh.
I'm just asking, what resources do you have for poor people in Africa? Because I know the world is turning red. And myself, I didn't make since I was small. My mother just shut my mouth. And secondly, I support this idea, but the thing is, it's expensive as we're talking about. And now there's a discrimination. If I say I didn't eat my friend's house, the vegetarian or vegan, I'm looking at the bad person.
So the question is, I'm going to rephrase the question because we have another short thing happening. So the question is, your question is directed at feeding the poor people. Resources. Yeah. Does anyone want to quickly answer that or give feedback on that question?
Maybe just an example. So in Buenos Aires, we are building agroecological, agroecological farms, small ones, for people that don't have what to eat. And that's really good because they can learn about nutrition and they can grow their own food and also sell it. So I think that's a good example on how that could work.
We're going to take this question to after the session. Thank you, because Gray is going to come on stage and give a lovely poem. Thank you. Welcome, Gray.
Hi, my name's Gray. It's really awesome to be here and to get to finish off this fab discussion. I'm a poet, so I'm going to do a poem, no surprises. It's called This Poem is Vegan. This poem is vegan, which means this poem does not eat eggs, dairy, seafood, or meat. Instead, this poem's diet consists of veggies, fruits, pulses, and nuts, but in real life, that means burgers, curries, ice cream, and donuts. This poem doesn't often eat salad. This poem is vegan, and that actually takes quite a lot to say. Since this poem knows admitting it could mean lengthy explanations and confrontations, and this poem has never really had high enough self-esteem to be good at defending itself. But no, this poem does not have a B12 deficiency. No, this poem does not think its diet is radical or limited. This poem thinks it's more extreme to eat corpses. And of course, this poem knows that bacon is delicious, but thinks there's too much cruelty in the world as is. This poem does not want his breakfast to contribute to it. And this poem wants everyone. That barista in Costa, the postman, and well-meaning Auntie Jean to know plants provide protein. They're packed with building block amino acids like oats and wheat have histidine, kiwis and apples isoleucine, sprouted grains contain threonine, of tryptophan, there's all bran brown bread and leafy greens, seeds and almonds have phenylalanine, whole grain rice and dates contain leucine, potatoes and peas are packed with methionine, with valine and lysine, there's cashews and legumes, not to mention plant-based complete proteins like quinoa, tofu, buckwheat and kidney beans. So thank you for your concern, Auntie Jean. But yes, this poem gets enough protein. There's more. And this poem feels amazing. Not just thinner, but all round healthier and wealthier, since lentils cost less than mince. And since going vegan, this poem has finally succeeded in donating blood, when before I was anemic. This poem feels great. I could have saved someone's life. This poem believes that Popeye was right. Spinach can give you superpowers. And this poem believes lots of things. This poem believes that whether or not it's in our nature to eat meat, we are still naturally compassionate creatures. This poem believes we're too disconnected from the food we eat and the pain it's felt. This poem believes that as humans, we have to stop assuming we own the rights to animals' bodies to use and discard as we please. This poem believes we have a lot to learn about consent. So, of course, this poem wants to change what you put in your mouth. Because this poem wants to make your digestive system happy. This poem wants to give you vegan bums so you can know the joys of pooping 5 times daily. This poem wants to save the environment, even if it's just one spoonful at a time. This poem wants to redefine what we think of as food. This poem wants no one to be hungry. This poem wants to use less space growing grain for cattle and more for people. This poem wants billions of animals a year to keep their life. This poem wants to stop digging our planet's grave with our forks and knives. And this poem knows it's unlikely it will change anything. This poem knows it's already threatening your identity. This poem knows your granddad was a butcher. This poem knows it goes against your culture. This poem knows that no one does what they do because they think it's the wrong thing. This poem is just grateful you listened, because your diet is yours and going vegan is no small feat. This poem just hopes that you know that there's so much power you exercise daily in what you choose to eat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our fantastic speakers. Thank you, Gray. That was beautiful. So many insightful tips, so many amazing lessons to take away. I'd invite you all to stay in for an amazing evening here at the Ferry with amazing entertainment, and jump back in tomorrow for some more content and amazing sessions. And tomorrow's day is on oceans, so a lot more sessions to come. Thank you so much, everybody.